Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, Eliud Wekesa Simiyu, also known as Jesus of Tongaren, is out of cells. And at the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to thank most sincerely one Edwin Wamalwa, the advocate of the High Court of Kenya, practicing in Bungoma town, for taking it his utmost duty to defend Eliud Wekesa Simiyu against his uncalled for incarceration. I also thank Professor George Luchiri Wajakoya, who is also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, for traveling all the way from Nairobi up to Bungoma to join the legal team of Jesus of Tongaren in seeking for his release. And I would like to point out this thing. The arrest and incarceration of Eliud Wekesa Simiyu is or was a wrongful one. Eliud Wekesa Simiyu had not committed any offense by calling himself Jesus of Tongaren, because he is not the only one. We have Gabriel Fernandez de Jesus, who plays for the English team Arsenal. He hasn't been arrested for calling himself so. Even in Bungoma, we have Moses Masika Wetangula, who was elected as senator for Bungoma before he became speaker. He calls himself Papa wa Roma. He has never been arrested for calling himself so. There are many Johns in the world. No one has arrested them for calling themselves John, because John was a name preserved for John the Baptist, of course, who baptized Jesus of Nazareth. There are many Jacobs, Adams, Isaac. Now, to selectively and maliciously pick Eliud Wekesa Simiyu just because he refers to himself Jesus of Tongaren smacks religious intolerance, religious persecution. Who told these people who are calling for the arrest of Jesus of Tongaren that the name Jesus cannot be used as a name for any other person? Even in our own community in Western Kenya, Wele or Were is a name preserved for God. But we have several Weres across Western. Does it mean that these Weres or Wele are God? It is just a name like any other. We also worship ancestral spirits, and we are named after our ancestors. Like me, I am Shivakale the second. I'm not the first person to be named Shivakale. Of course, my grandfather was called Shivakale, and he was not the first person to be called Shivakale. He was named after Shivakale the first. And that Shivakale the first is our ancestor. Now, would anybody come and arrest me and any other person who has been named Shivakale because this name belonged to our ancestor whom we worship, whose spirit we invoke for purposes of obtaining blessings? Will you call that blasphemy? It is illogical. So, the Christians, the religious leaders who have been condemning and calling for the arrest of Eliud Wekesa Simiyu just because he calls himself Jesus of Tongaren are wrong. This habit of preserving Jesus in European description, in Western description, must stop. And I must take this opportunity to congratulate Eliud Wekesa Simiyu for expounding the concept of Jesus in African perspective. When you read the Bible, there are a lot of good things that Jesus of Nazareth did, of which any reasonable human being would like to associate himself with. Now, how will you associate yourself with the good things of Christ, the good things of Jesus of Nazareth, without devolving those good things in your local settings? As long as your creativity, your religious creativity, in aping, in explaining, in adopting the positive side of Jesus of Nazareth will not infringe on the laws of the country as presently constituted, there is nothing wrong. After all, our Constitution of Kenya 2010 guarantees our right to freedom of worship. We have liberty to worship, to believe religiously in anything we wish to, as long as that belief, that worship is not unconstitutional, illegal. It does not transgress on the laws of the country as presently constituted. So Eliud Wekesa Simiyu has all rights, like any other person, to call himself Jesus of Tongaren, as long as he is doing so within the confines of the law. Lastly, I would also like to take this opportunity to condemn the Bungoma governor, Kenneth Makgelo Lusaka, Kimilili Member of Parliament, Didmus Wekesa Barasa, and Kakamega Senator, Dr. Boni Khalwale, for weeping public emotions in condemnation of Eliud Wekesa Simiyu just because he was exercising his right of freedom of worship. If Eliud Wekesa Simiyu was calling himself Jesus of Tongaren, and Khalwale, Lusaka, or Didmus Wekesa Barasa did not believe or do not believe that he is not the Jesus of Tongaren, who has stopped Didmus Wekesa Barasa to call himself Jesus of Bakwangwa? Who has stopped Kenneth Makelo Lusaka to call himself Jesus of Batejo? Who has stopped Dr. Boni Khalwale to call himself Jesus of Bamusali? They have all rights to call themselves so if they don't believe that Eliud Wekesa is Jesus of Tongaren, as long as they do it within the confines of the law. It is unacceptable and it must be condemned in the strongest terms possible, because these leaders who have been elected to ensure that they protect, defend the Constitution as state officers are now on the forefront to stifle the provisions of that Constitution by weeping public emotions, to frown upon the right of their fellow citizens or citizen from exercising his constitutional right of freedom of worship.